Welcome to Stampscaping 101. Let's get this scene finished off in a very quick and easy way. I'm picking out some colors here just to kind of make a little quaint little pond down here, okay? It's going to be single source lighting, meaning just one source of light. It's going to represent reflected light, all right? With a little pool down here, I thought I'd use the loon while I had it out. I don't use that too often, but I should. I want to do a whole loon scene sometime. Kind of what I'm thinking about is a kind of a twilight type of scene on a lake. Not this one, but just real foggy and misty, and I have these loon kind of calls that are on my iMovie. I don't know, I guess they're just kind of inherent pre-recorded sounds on that program. That's a program on Apple computers, iMovie, and that's what I edit all my videos on these days. Okay, that was going on a little bit too slow, the Memento Bahama Blue, so I'm just speeding this up. I just put some Distress Ink tumbled glass in here. It's going to be a little bit of a combination between the tumbled glass and Bahama Blue. But if you ever want to make something go like really fast, just put some ringer drops on your applicator here. This happens to be a silk-coated Mohawk, everyday digital white-coated silk cardstock, okay? And it is a satiny, dull sheen, kind of lightly, it's basically a lightly coated cardstock, okay? There's glossy cardstocks, there's matte cardstocks. This is somewhere in between, but it's much closer to the matte, okay? Now I'm just dabbing this because I kind of made a mistake with my stamp sketches. I used the black pigment ink, VersaFine Clair up here. I was thinking I was going to do all these in colored pencil, but I thought, but I really like doing that, but I really like getting a little bit of a head start to my coloring with just a base coat of dye-based inks, and you can see how fast this really fills in here, okay? Now, I'm going to be going for a little bit of variation. Now, this is not applied real smoothly or nicely, evenly, anything like that, okay? It doesn't have to be. Sometimes people will get into kind of the blending process and they get a little panicky because their first color that they lay down isn't quite so smooth as they think it should be, all right? And they think that's just the way it's going to be inherently forever, okay? And now, if you just leave it at that, yeah, that's the way it's going to be, but there's a lot of other layers of ink to come, so you don't really need to worry about that, okay? Now, what we're going to be doing is we're going to be laying down, well, I don't know, maybe 4 or 5 layers of dye-based inks here in kind of a glazing process, okay? So we'll get a little bit darker with each hue. All right, now that's kind of laid down there. I have a little bit of light in here that's going to represent that reflected light. I'm going for that kind of that twilight type of look here. So I've taken a lot of the lightness out of the top portion up there. Okay. It was already kind of taken care of with the all the leaves up here, the birch leaves. Okay. All right. Now here's where I'm kind of running into some pigment issues up here. As I wipe that, it's kind of wiping off some of that surface layer of black oil-based pigment ink, which is, again, the Clair. I love that, but I should have just waited to stamp that in the end, the final step, I should say. I can still do it, and I can add some more of that down there in the final step, but, I'm dragging around a little bit of black ink over the surface right here, okay? So I'm getting a little smudgy. It's probably on my fingers, too, because it's oil-based ink, okay? No big deal. Okay, so this is still a little bit streaky, and, I'm getting a little bit of texturing with that black ink. Don't worry about all that, okay? Just keep working your pieces like that. Don't kind of edit yourself too much, you know, when you're doing these things. Kind of focus in on the process and trust the process. Well, you don't have to trust it, but just do it. Okay, so see, I'm just adding more inks. Let me show you a close-up of all those little smudgies that are around here. See, it's like here, here. You can see it right in here, too. Now, those little holes in there were already in there because I was stamping like a super wet, you know, um, pigment ink, oil-based pigment ink at that, over kind of moist water-based ink. Okay, so the oil and water didn't really mix, and I didn't hold it down. But I knew I was going to add some additional tones up here anyway, like what I'm doing right now, so it wouldn't really matter. So that's what I mean, you know, when I'm doing my pieces, early on in the piece, I know kind of the different processes my pieces are going to go through. I don't have to have confidence in kind of, you know, the fact that there's other things we can come do that will overcome kind of the existing visuals at any given point in time, because we're kind of at step A when we're going to get to, you know, eventually to step Y or something like that, okay? So don't kind of see your pieces as kind of finished end effects, results, etc. when you're just starting something out, okay? If you need to, I don't know, put it aside, look at it, decide to do it later. I don't, you know, I just keep working it. Okay, so this is working through some darker blues. I'm getting into some of the Marvy blues. They're just darker like that, okay? And they penetrate kind of thicker styles of ink because Marvy inks are a little bit thinner. Now you can get this type of look here with other types of inks. So you might just have to let it dry a little bit, let it set up so that you're not kind of applying wet into wet, and the surface, in this case the paper, cardstock, is accepting the ink. You know, it'll absorb it enough, okay? You can see my paper towel's starting to kind of fray a little bit. It doesn't do that so much. I don't see like that fraying on glossy cardstock, but like I said, this is a kind of more of a matte. You can do this on here. It doesn't absorb things so much like a matte, but the more kind of absorbent it is, spend a little bit more time with those initial base layers. So again, this one was the really light tumbled glass here, okay? So it's kind of taken on, you know, kind of a muted look here the darker we go, okay? Now, one of the things that I feel from a technique standpoint, I feel this is kind of, it's starting to dry up on me a little bit, okay? So I'm thinking about adding some more of this tumbled glass or whatever ink you use to begin with, your lightest color usually, okay? I won't apply so much of it this time because, again, it already has a certain degree of saturation in here. Okay, this is going on beautifully too. But it'll just kind of re-moisten it so that we can add on our darker tones kind of with, you know, a little bit more ease because of the wet surface nature of the piece. I'll show you how wet this is right here, okay? Let me run my finger through it, okay? Alright, can you see that? See those kind of those lines that are in there from my fingernail? That's how wet it is, okay? See what I'm doing? I'm just kind of building things up. It's kind of achieving super saturation, and that ink starts to kind of stay on the surface. It kind of puddles a little bit on the surface a little bit, so that it's easier to spread and blend our colors around, okay? So, it's not just coverage, or, yeah, coverage, but it's kind of saturation in many ways. Okay, this is black, okay? It'll probably be some incarnation of black, kind of more of a green, gray, okay? Well, it's going on pretty good. So it tells me that this ink is kind of drying on here, so that it's accepting a good amount, or a pretty good value of this black here. If it was really super wet down here, and you streak that in there, it wouldn't transfer so much of the ink over to that paper, because it would just be so wet down here. It'd be trying to, apply wet into wet. All right. Okay. Yeah. All right. Kind of go in four corners. If you go four corners with black, it really makes the interior area kind of glow for you. Because the darker areas on the outside bring forth more contrast to the lighter areas. Okay, it doesn't have to be the white of the paper. I didn't really leave too much white there. A lot of it is the tumbled glass, that really light blue. All right, but I tend to see this as kind of like it's like a little poem or something like that, a visual poem. When you have that type of, I don't know, simplicity and kind of a limited value range. Okay, it's just muted. It looks like a foggy kind of muted. I don't know, dusk or dawn. Kind of that type of lighting, very still feeling. Okay, all right. I'm just going in here. I'm adding a little bit more black. As I said that, I was thinking, I could probably take it a little bit more, a little bit further. And we can, especially, I don't know, just that little time allowing it to set up and dry. Okay. Drying time will depend on the relative humidity of your location, temperature, etc. I think that will do it right there, okay? Let's see. Let's bring in this loon in here. All right. I'm wondering if I should do this in the VersaFine Clair or the Marvy block. Let's do it in the VersaFine. Let's go for a nice dark impression. I really love the pad of the VersaFine Clair. It's really firm. There's just a nice solidity to it. Okay, don't smash your beak there. We don't want that to look like a platypus or something like that. Very, very dark, very crisp, as is the VersaFine Clair. Okay. All right. What to do on the top portion? I'm thinking a word stamp or something like that. Different possibilities available to us. Let's go for a little bit more black up there. I think I am going to stamp something up there, maybe in reverse text, meaning white on light. I think that might look interesting here. I'm tempted to add in some additional texture down below in the water, but maybe I should just leave it like that, very still and quiet. Okay, I think I might allow this to dry too, and we'll get it formatted up into a card. All right. Hold on there. I think I am going to add a little bit of this. Just a little bit of that texture, but in a very light value. Okay. All right. Okay. That is Memento Bahama Blue. Let's try the Danube Blue. Lighter blue, kind of, fill in the area down there. And where it gets darker down there, we're not going to be able to see that value of blue, so we have to add a darker value down there. I think that's kind of anchoring off the piece pretty nicely there. Okay, just with some texture. You don't have to go with anything too extreme. I mean, you could, but you don't have to. Okay, so just kind of anchoring out the bottom point like that with a little bit of texture. Okay, now that's going to dry much lighter looking than it looks right now. So I might even go to black down here. I'm not sure. Okay, but let's just leave it at that right now. I think this is a really nice, calm piece kind of developing here, and I like the look. Let's figure out what to do with it in a bit. In the meantime, let's see. Kind of making an assessment here. All right, we'll be back and we'll finish this up in a bit. All right, let's add a quote to this piece. I've allowed it to set up here for about, I don't know, maybe 10 minutes or so. It's not completely, dry, but the loon has set up a little bit. It's still wet. You can see where it's really shiny like that. I'll just be careful not to touch it. I mean, we can heat set this and it'll be, good to go and completely dry. But I prefer it to air dry whenever possible. I mean, if you're not in a hurry, and in this case, I could just work around it. Okay, so I'm going to stamp this out in a Brilliance ink. Now, the Brilliance inks are a fast-drying white, or just fast-drying pigment ink in general. They're water-based inks, all right, and they're pretty good about sticking to whatever you stamp them on. That goes from anything from, your standard cardstock to your, unconventional stamping surfaces. Maybe that you've never stamped on before. Things like foils, vellums, glossy cardstock. The glossy cardstock is really what these were designed to dry on because everyone was using that, and some people wanted to have a pigment ink that would dry on there, so Tsukaneko came up with this. Kind of in the exciting days of, rubber stamp accessory experimentation, development, I don't know, just departments devoted to R&D for stamping, practitioners. I don't see so much of that anymore. There are certain things that are out there that are really good, okay? But I don't see quite the innovation. There's just, without a lot of the independent stores, it's tough to kind of move a large amount of certain types of accessories that might necessitate kind of new formulas and the development of new, vehicles to bring those types of things to market, like, dye-based, molds and things like that, dyes, And that's where we are these days. But there's plenty of things out there. There's a lot more things out there than there used to be when stamping first started, and we got it all done. All right, so that is the scene with the quote right there. It kind of blends right in with the background, but when you hold it at arm's distance, it does read pretty well. And that's why we made the area on the background a little bit darker so that a reversed out text would stand out and be readable with no problem. Now, the more, the bolder your fonts are, the more readable it would be. But it just depends on what kind of look you're going after. Okay, so what we have right here is a pretty muted value range, okay? Anytime you kind of take out most of the white, it changes the spirit of a piece. It kind of makes it a little bit quieter and, maybe more tranquil. I often leave white, and maybe I should kind of take it out more often and just go to, the lightest color as opposed to white as my light source. But that being said, I do like to have a good value range. So even if I do take out all of the white of the paper, what I like to do is I like to reinvigorate in some select areas something akin to that white of the paper value. So you have your white acrylic paint pens. This one's 0.7 millimeter. and it works really good for this. Okay, maybe I'll use some light blue too. I have all the different Artistro colors. Okay, now these white paint pens, they're pretty good about giving you a pretty good mark, okay? And what I mean by that is applying a fairly opaque, okay, non-see-through dot. Now I say fairly opaque, it's not really opaque, it's somewhere on the translucent scale, okay? So you can see through it, in other words. So it's not just a really stark white. Maybe that's good, I don't know. Because it incorporates in the background a little bit more when you have it a little bit more see-through, so it integrates, okay? But sometimes you want a stark white dot, and I don't know, I haven't tried some of the oil-based paint pens in a while. I used to use one by Marvy, I think it was. But these ones are acrylics, so they're water-based. Okay, so there's those little white dots. I mean, they're not that visible, okay? But let me try something with kind of an aqua color here, because we did use the Caribbean blue on here, which is a little bit of tinge of green, so it's a little bit of a warm blue, okay? Now we have that same type of color with the paint pen. The paint pen looks like it's supposed to be a little bit lighter in value, though, than this one. So we'll see if this one stands out. I don't expect it to stand out too much because there's not going to be as much contrast between this color and the background, okay? I mean, I could make it stand out a touch more by putting it in some of these darker areas, but I don't really want that. I want it to just kind of look like a little bit of a surface shimmer texture. All right, now it barely shows up. Let me see if I can show you where that went. I mean, I'm doing it and I barely see it. It did apply though, but I don't know if you'd see a few little kind of greenish dots in that area. I mean, it's really obscure. You know, we probably didn't even need to do that. All right, so I think I am just going to leave it at that for right now, and I might want to add a little bit of kind of fog or mist on this. And where that's going to go is it's going to go right around the loon. So we definitely have to have that nice and dry, so I'm going to give it overnight to dry. And let's see, we'll format it up and we'll take a look and see what this looks like as a card. All right. All right, I have chosen from my somewhat limited collection of papers what to mat this off with. Now, normally I'm going for kind of a glossier look, but of course this one I've done on the Mohawk white-coated silk, and I'm going to leave it at that kind of that flat type of look. If I spray it with anything, it'll be with a workable fixative. So I'm going with this really pale blue. I could use a little bit more contrast, but I just don't have anything that's a little bit darker that's also in cover weight. I do have some text weight papers, but I am going to use this one. It has a little bit of texture in it too. So we're not getting much texture, much contrast via value in terms of light and dark, but we are getting some textural contrast, slightly. It's not anything huge, but so you can do these things. You can play contrasts against one another. You know, the biggest, kind of most obvious one is going to be value. Again, in terms of light and dark contrast. But you can play around with, there's textural contrast. You can go with something that's, this one's just a little bit more textured. You can go with one that's visually textured more, something like a iridescent type of paper. You know, it's really smooth, but it has that reflective texture to it. And that would be interesting for this one. It would kind of match the shimmering water, but the problem with that one is that it might be a little bit more exciting of a surface than the color pattern that you've created by hand, and you wouldn't want that to compete too much. It might look good. I don't know. Like, for example, here's a Star Dream. Actually, it looks really nice, that Star Dream paper right there, that little bit of iridescent. It kind of matches, actually, what's going on here, but this would be a good choice for the card. Maybe I'll make my card out of the Star Dream as far as my final piece. This is a... Let me see the width here. I'm already at kind of up to a pretty wide width. This is 5 inches, so this would be 11. So we could do this. It would be real thin in terms of the card. The card itself. Now, I don't have a cover weight Star Dream lapis lazuli, so let's just go with the text. I mean, it's not a real thin text. I mean, this would be adequate here, but definitely the stability would be created by the mounting here paper. I can go with something like this. I can just leave it like this too, 8.5 by 11. Just make it standard size. It would be a little bit longer down here. I think it doesn't look too bad. So, double mount here, and then final card. I keep things pretty easy. Just kind of working things around the standard formats here. So I'll go like this. I'm just going to eyeball it here. I leave a little bit more room down below, okay, in terms of this area for a foundation, okay. I mean, I could cut this down. We could cut this up here and up here. It's a little bit big, okay? But I don't think that looks too bad like that, okay? And when we have our card here. So, I mean, this right here might be interesting, kind of if it was in its own separate mat, or it could have been down here in a quote too, but I think it looks pretty cool up there. Like that. It's kind of hidden amongst the leaves. I wouldn't say it floats in there from a visual standpoint. If it was on something like the mirrored cardstocks and we put that on there, it really looks like it's floating in that area. But I don't know, just for a two-dimensional piece right here, I think that makes for a pretty nice little statement. And there's power in simplicity and quietness too. I don't often do that because I'm going for bigger contrasts and things like that, but I really should, because I like the look of this. This would be kind of interesting too, maybe with a little crystal or something like that as well. Let's do that here. Let's add just a slight little bling into it, okay? So it'll be a tiny little couple of embellishments. I barely need any glue for this one. Believe it or not, you tighten the opposite direction with this bottle here. Well, they don't expect you to be opening it either, but my glue is too thick at this point in time because it's too old. And that's stupid. I haven't gotten a new one. I tend to use things until I can't use them anymore. So I don't think to, when I'm buying some supplies, I don't think, I need some glue. Okay, so just applying like 3, 4, 5 little dots of glue here. And let's go with the smallest of crystals, okay? Let me just take some out with my finger here. They just stick to the heat and moisture of your finger because they're so small. But it's easier to apply with the jewel picker. Exactly where you want them to go. I wouldn't have known these jewel pickers exist except for someone on, I think it was Facebook in the Stamp Junkies group. So I can't thank you. No, that's where I get my a lot of my tips from. My fellow stampers that know these types of things. I don't follow a lot of the accessory types of developments, that have been out there for the last 20 years. Okay, so there's little crystals like that. When you go like that, this is at arm's distance, okay? And you can kind of see them there, but again, I like all these little types of things like this that reward the recipient of your card for further, inspection, as they say. All right? So there's little things like that. See how simple that is, but then there's that little tiny bling down there. Glitter would be good too, like a stickles or whatever, there's different types of glitter things. Would be good down here. You can use like I have some gel pens too that would have been good. I would do one or the other, I think, though. Something like this, or little gel pen glitter down there. Something subtle, so that it, I don't know, when someone looks at it, they don't notice it upon maybe first glance, but then when they look at it a little bit closer, there's that little kind of a feature in there. Now in here, we can go for some kind of sequential aesthetic type of thing and add some sort of element that's from here. The leaves would be kind of a natural one to put them in there, just like a white version of a leaf or something like that. Maybe, a reverse impression of it. I wouldn't go for the loon again in here. Or you can do it like a leaf down here. You can do it like a smaller version of it. Would be good. Let me see if I can go find... Okay, I'm going to stem this little tiny leaf here. This one's off the birch ones. And it's kind of it's not the same stamp, but it's similar. I'm going to stamp this one on the back of the piece down here. I gotta make sure I don't put this in that little puddle of glue. I'm gonna do this one going up like this. All right, and then we'll take our white paint pen and put your little initial like that. Okay. So we have this here. You open up, write whatever you want in here, and that. I don't know, after I put that little leaf down there, I don't know if I'm going to put anything, stamp something on the inside. I don't know, I can figure something out, but there it is. There's our pretty simple card. Power and simplicity, and certainly easy to do, just that water pattern for the most part. A couple little blingy little additions in there. I think the words right over the top of it kind of fill out that area up there. You take out those words, and I think it looks okay, but I don't know. I think it needed some sort of visual addition up in that space. But I don't know. It depends what you're going after. In a card format, I like the words. If you're just doing just a scene, just scenic stamping for the sake of that, I think that without the words, it's fine. It wouldn't be missing anything. It would just be a simple statement about kind of this little quiet moment here, kind of like poetry again. Okay, so anyways, thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed it. Thanks as always for tuning into the Stampscapes channel.